Hey there, friends. Who wants to have their Second Amendment rights trampled on? Yeah, not me. I pulled this from an article on AmmoLand. Gabriel Cowan Metcalf, 49, had an initial appearance on a criminal complaint charging him with possessing a firearm within a school zone. If convicted, Metcalf faces a maximum of 5 years in prison, a $100,000 fine, and 3 years of supervised release. Now it gets better. This guy is being made an example of. I don't know the backstory on the guy, but I'm just telling you, he's being made an example of. U.S. Magistrate Judge Timothy Caven presided. Metcalf was detained pending further proceedings. So this man is still locked up for carrying a firearm in a school zone. Now you may be thinking, wow, that sounds pretty bad. Remember, I put out a story last week stating that a lot of these school systems out there, these liberal run school systems, are not wanting to expel the children for more than a year or indefinitely who bring a gun to school. But we got a guy, an adult, who does not, he's not a student at the school, who had a gun. So you're thinking, wow, well, that still sounds bad, right? He wasn't on school property. The government alleged in court documents that from August 2nd to the 17th of August, the Billings Police Department received multiple calls and weapons complaints regarding Metcalf, who lives at 430 Broadwater Avenue, walking on the sidewalk and around the area carrying a firearm. Broadwater Elementary School is directly across the street from Metcalf's residence. The sidewalk and streets in front of Metcalf's residence are public property within 1,000 feet from the school and are a school zone as defined in federal statutes. So as you can see here, his house is a little ways down the road. If you look right in front of the school, which is where I have this positioned, and you look down the road, this house way down here with the light brown roof, that's Metcalf's house. Again, it is on the same road. It's a slight ways down the road. And as you can see, if we use the 1,000-foot distance that the law that they have, this unconstitutional school zone law that they have in place, you'll note that, of course, even though his house itself is very far from the school property is directly across the street. So this entire area where this fence is on the school property is going to be considered a gun-free zone no matter how far from the school it is. So he is just barely directly across the street from that. Now, the thing that perplexed me is this next point. Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives agents arrested Metcalf near his residence on Tuesday night pursuant to a warrant issued by a federal judge and executed a search on the residence of 430 Broadwater Avenue. So the ATF arrested him on a school zone charge. What the hell? Why is the ATF being involved in a guy who they're claiming is carrying a gun in a school zone, which is not in a school zone? He is literally in front of his property. Now, to be fair, I don't know how far down, up or down the property, but all the stories that I have read was that he was on the opposite side of the road. So he was not on school property. He never was. He was never on school property. He was on public property, which technically that's right in front of the school also. The sidewalk is not school property. That is public property where anybody can walk on that. That does not belong to the school. But nevertheless, he was on the opposite side of the street. Again, not on school property. But they still consider that in the school zone because it is within 1,000 feet of that fence that you see across the street from his home where he lives. But a federal judge is the one who issued the warrant, and they executed a search of the residence. I don't understand that either. As petty as this is, again, there's no claim of threats made. There's no claim of him having a fire. Believe me, if there were threats made and if there were firearms on school property, you would know that. That would be their justification for making this story a bigger story than what it really is. So we can almost assume that there was no gun on the property and there were no threats made if they're not talking about it. And I almost have to think that unless he was open carrying, how did anybody know he was carrying anyway? Again, they're saying that between August the 2nd and August the 17th, there were multiple charges or at least accusations that resulted in him getting the charge. But the search on his house is what I don't understand. How did we get to that point? How did any of this scenario result in a search on the house unless they're making the automatic jump that he's likely a school shooter. I mean, unless they're stupid, a school shooter is not usually likely. In fact, this has to be the only case that I would assume has ever been a thing where a potential school shooter lived right across the street from the school. Very unlikely. The odds are that that's not what this guy is going to do. Maybe they're making that jump. Maybe they're saying, oh, you know, if you had a gun in a gun-free zone, they probably have some stupid little policy that says if you investigate anybody who has a gun in a gun-free zone, school zone, that you automatically search their home. I have to assume that is the case, because this is really crossing the line if they just searched his house just because. It's crossing the line anyway. And as they state here in the article, a criminal complaint is only an accusation, and a defendant is presumed innocent until proven guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. I have to ask this: how do they know he was carrying a gun? Just because you have multiple complaints, it could be the same neighbor, it could be a slew of neighbors. The guy might be a jerk. He might be an a-hole, and he might have pissed off everybody on that side of the street. I get that. It doesn't mean that you can violate his constitutional rights at that point. If you need to, take him out back, pummel his ass. But you still don't have the right to violate his rights just because you don't like the guy. There's a lot of jerks that I know out there. I don't think they belong in jail, and I don't think they should have their constitutional rights stripped from them. So even if there were multiple complaints, where is the proof? And why is he being held in jail? Make no mistake, guys, this guy was arrested based on accusations, no proof according to this article, and he's still in jail. This seems a little bit extreme for an accusation made through phone calls. Again, maybe they sent pictures. I don't know. Maybe somebody's got pictures of this. They're certainly not alluding to any real meat based on this article as to this guy deserving the kind of treatment that he's got. Now, is he going to get his day? Yes, he is. And he will win. This is absolutely unconstitutional. This is a perfect example. I've been interviewing some parish sheriff candidates for the area that I live in. I live in Louisiana. We have parishes, not counties. And one of the 5 questions that I've asked all the candidates is that, would you be willing to arrest somebody if the law itself that was in place was deemed unconstitutional? Because a lot of them have said, well, I'll just be following the law. And I had to remind a bunch of them that you can violate the Constitution and still be enforcing a law. They are not interchangeable. They should be, but they are not interchangeable. There is a lot of unconstitutional laws on the books that are laws. So you can't go out there and say, I'm enforcing this law and it's automatically constitutional. That's absolutely not the case. This is one of those instances. There is a law on the books, as you all know, is the mid-90s. That's a school zone law, gun-free zone law. And it precludes anybody from carrying a gun onto any property within 1,000 feet of a school. That's unconstitutional. It absolutely is unconstitutional. You are stripping every single person of their Second Amendment rights that comes within 1,000 feet of that school. Now let's remember, we've got Heller, now we've got Bruen out there that say this guy can have that gun. They absolutely are saying that. He can have, according to Heller and according to Bruen, this man can have that gun within 1,000 square feet of that school property. But these people are enforcing this as if he was on school property. I have to assume that whenever they went to arrest him, he likely did not have a firearm on him, and they wanted to go into his house to see if a firearm was there, and if a firearm was there, I would be willing to bet that they would count that firearm being within 1,000 square feet of the school property, and that's where his charge came from. That's unconstitutional. There is nothing constitutional about a person not being able to carry a gun within 1,000 feet of a school. Again, we can have the conversation about people carrying a gun at the school, in the school, on the school playground. We can talk about that another time. That's not what this man was doing. I mean, guys, the only thing that makes sense, and I'm not justifying this, but based on the text of the Gun-Free School Zone Act of '95, the only way this could apply was if he were just on the sidewalk. Because according to this, and again, I don't know if it's been amended at some point. I don't know where or if it has. It says it shall be unlawful for any individual knowingly to possess a firearm that has moved in or that otherwise affects interstate or foreign commerce at a place that the individual knows or has reasonable cause to believe is a school zone. Now it says right below that shall not apply to the possession of a firearm The very first one, on private property, not part of school grounds. So this alone tells me that he had to have been at least on the sidewalk. Because obviously, according to this, if he was in his yard, all bets are off. So what do? You stand in the grass, and if you accidentally step off the grass onto the sidewalk, boom, that's when the ATF agents swoop in. Folks, this is a massive overreach. And I have so many questions about this story. Mainly the ATF's involvement. What are these people doing over there? If this were such a heinous crime, don't you think local law enforcement would have wanted to be involved? Not saying that they weren't involved, but it does sound like the ATF headed this up. And they did not state that local law enforcement was involved or made the arrest. They said that the federal agents made the arrest. Again, I don't know that I've ever heard of an incident like this. You will hear about this one again, and I hope this man is smart enough to know that this should go all the way to the Supreme Court. It's likely to get struck down before it ever makes it anywhere near the Supreme Court. But if he makes it to the Supreme Court under the current justices that we have in there, this is a home run for him. An absolute home run. This man's rights have not only been violated, according to this article that he's still in jail, they're continuing to be violated for him having a gun across the street from a school. And look, we're not going to pretend like the wackos on the far left in the gun control movement do, where they count a shooting in a gun-free zone when it's at 3 a.m. in the morning across the street at a liquor store when it's across the street from a school. We're not going to pretend that. I would be willing to bet this was not even during school hours. I would be willing to bet this is probably in the afternoons. It probably has nothing to do with school hours. So this is probably a massive overreaction and overreach. But I'm glad that they did this. I hate it for the man, for Metcalf, but I'm glad that they did this, because this is likely going to be a case that's going to change a lot out there. Because let me repeat this, gun-free zones, especially the stupid 1,000-foot rule, are super unconstitutional, and that needs to be changed.
God save the Queen, man.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America.
God save the Queen, man.
I'm sorry, I thought this was America. He's